In the early hours of April 15th, 1912, the RMS Titanic sank into the northern Atlantic Ocean. 85 years later, the film Titanic featured a fictional story set in the middle of the disaster. Though the main characters are entirely fictional, their setting and many supporting characters were very real. But to what extent? How accurate is Titanic? To start off, we're not going to talk about the film's framing device of the present-day salvage ship and its characters. Also, the core group of characters, including Rose and her family, and Jack and his friends, were all created for the film as a plot device to provide the audience with multiple perspectives of the ship. Even though some fans have discovered a passenger on the manifest listed as J. Dawson, this is just a coincidence. Aside from them, most every other person is a historical figure, and their real-world actions are depicted in the film, to one degree or another. And the timeline of events, from the striking of the iceberg to the sinking itself, are very accurate, almost down to the minute, which we can see thanks to some characters who enjoy watching clocks. As depicted in the film, at 11:39 p.m. on April 14th, lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg straight in the path of the Titanic. Fleet phoned the sighting to the bridge, where First Officer William Murdoch ordered a change of course to avoid the iceberg. However, it was spotted too late, and the ship's starboard side grazed it, causing 5 of its forward compartments to begin filling with water. Minutes after the collision, Captain Smith and Thomas Andrews, the ship's builder, surveyed the damage and determined that the ship would sink. At around 5 minutes past midnight, Captain Smith ordered the lifeboats uncovered and began moving passengers to the boat deck. By 12:45, lifeboats began to be sent off. However, the first several were severely under capacity. Later boats would be filled up completely. Around 1:15, as the ship was tilting more and panic began to spread through the evacuees, multiple officers fired warning shots from their revolvers to control the crowd. However, there are no reports of passengers being shot. The film shows Officer Murdoch doing so, and then shooting himself. Some survivors say they saw an officer shoot himself. However, there is no proof of this, or that it was Murdoch, and the filmmakers would later apologize to his family for depicting him doing so. The last lifeboat was launched at 2:05, and the ship would be completely under by 2:20. All 20 of the Titanic's lifeboats would be used. However, one of them was capsized and later turned over by survivors swimming in the water after the ship went under, and one was partially flooded, causing hypothermia for several of its occupants. Some survivors would be picked up from the water by other boats. However, despite the number given by Rose in the film, the exact numbers are unknown. Correctly stated in the film, the Titanic had only enough lifeboats for less than half of its passengers, and less than a third of its full capacity. However, the film does not mention that they actually had more than what was legally required at the time. The logic being that there was no way the ship would sink before a rescue ship would get there, and the lifeboats would only be used to ferry passengers between the ships. And the problem was compounded by the fact that the crew was ill-trained to man them, and a drill for the passengers was supposed to take place the morning of the 14th, but it was cancelled for unknown reasons. The details of the ship are largely accurate. However, it is the actions of some of the historical characters that feature the biggest inaccuracies of this film. Perhaps the most featured historical character was that of Thomas Andrews, the Titanic's architect, shown as a very kind person who, grief-stricken, spends the sinking by himself in a smoking room watching a clock. While there is an account of him doing this, there are more saying that he spent his time organizing people onto the boats and then throwing furniture overboard to use as flotation devices. Another first-class passenger prominently featured was Margaret Brown. Her personality was pretty well represented in the film. However, they reference her well-known nickname, the unsinkable Molly Brown, but they don't show her actions that earned her the name. After the Titanic went down, Brown was with other women on Lifeboat 6, and after Quartermaster Robert Hitchens refused to take the boat back to look for survivors, she took control of the boat from him and then took it back to the debris field with the other women. Records are not clear if Lifeboat 6 was able to find any other survivors. However, her actions were enough to endear her to the newspapers. It was almost the opposite press reaction for J. Bruce Ismay. While there is no real evidence that he encouraged Captain Smith to speed up the ship for a favorable arrival time, He was the chairman of the White Star Line, and therefore much of the tragedy was his responsibility. As in the movie, Ismay did assist with the evacuation of other passengers before leaving the ship himself on collapsible lifeboat C. However, while the film strongly implies that he did so selfishly and as a coward, the official inquiry into the sinking found that he left the ship within 20 minutes of it going down, and that there was no one else who could have taken his seat if he had not. In direct contrast to Ismay, the film portrayal of Captain Edward John Smith has him honorably walking onto the bridge to go down with the ship. While there are obviously no accounts from the bridge itself, there are reports from various ship officers that he did indeed enter the ship's wheelhouse prior to it being engulfed in water. And perhaps the most famous real-life images from Titanic are that of the band playing onto the final moments of the ship. In particular, that of violinist and bandmaster Wallace Hartley. There are numerous witness accounts that all say the band continued to play up until they themselves were swept away by the waters. Though their final song is not known, one of their last was, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." In the end, of the 2,224 people aboard the RMS Titanic, 1,514 lives were lost, and only 710 were saved. Because of the tragedy of the Titanic, several laws about cruise liners were changed, including minimum number of lifeboats and crew training to use them. All in all, Titanic proves to be one of the more accurate stories in Hollywood, despite the fact that its main plotline is completely fictional. But let us know what you think. We didn't cover everything, but do you think we got the important parts, or would you have included something else? Tell us in the comments below and suggest other movies for us to look at. Subscribe and ring the bell icon to catch new videos. Thanks for watching.